Good evening and welcome to the March membership meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Cheryl Gannon and I'm the president. Tonight we're going to hold routine business until after our speaker, since our speaker is here right now. And I am going to turn this over to Joyce Gwads right now for an introduction.
County Executive Marc Elrich, our speaker this evening, needs no introduction here, but in keeping with our speaker protocol, I'm going to offer one anyway. Marc has spent most of his life here in Montgomery County, a product of and a teacher in our public schools, for 12 years an at-large member of our county council and county executive since December of 2018. As county executive, Marc's focus has included economic development, transportation, and affordable housing, and most recently has been working with members of the PG County Council to develop a response to Governor Moore's housing proposals. He was invited this evening to bring us up to date on the county budget and will welcome questions on that and other county matters after his presentation. Please welcome County Executive Marc Elrich.
Who we don't see.
Yeah, I was going to say, Marc. He was here.
That's fine. Yikes. The Freeman.
Have the zombies already taken him away?
He didn't like what I was saying, so he cut off.
No, something technical.
I hope there's someone there to get him back on.
Phone call, maybe?
Yeah, I'm calling him now. If he hasn't blocked me.
Should we knock out some of the business while we're waiting?
Sound on this blooming Zoom call.
Blooming Zoom.
Yeah.
Here he is. Oops.
Recording in progress.
Marc,
Over
you're
the much
muted.
worse camera.
There you go, Marc. Okay, you can go ahead and start, Marc.
Hang on 1 second. I guess that's about as good as the stupid camera is going to get.
Okay. We
That
can-
was better.
You were better before.
I know. Like the other computers started jumping around that I couldn't hold the picture or anything. So
Okay.
here I am on this computer. Plan B.
All right, well, I don't know if you heard, but we did introduce you, so you can just start anytime you want.
I did not hear my introduction.
Well, it was a nice one.
It was fabulous.
Best
Okay.
I've ever heard.
So I guess, I was thinking more about the conversation. What do you want me, what are you most interested in?
This meeting is being recorded.
In echo.
Well, you want to just sort of give us the highlights of what you see coming out of the budget process, and then I'm guessing people will want to ask you about the governor's housing bill.
Yeah, probably will. So, this budget is probably the most difficult budget I've had to do since I was elected. The first year I was elected, we walked in, and 2 days later, we were told we had a $50 million deficit. And then 3 months later, we were told the state came back and said, you've got to write down another 30 million. And that was in the middle of a budget. So we had to make in-year cuts of $80 million. And that's really hard to do when you're doing it in half a year. It was probably the most unpleasant experience I ever had. I've tried, as you well know, a couple of things. One is I've tried to raise taxes so that the budgets are supported by the taxes we raise. And we've been living for a long time on using reserves to balance budgets. And in the old days, when I was there, they had never achieved the 10% target, but people still used reserves if they needed to pull money into the budget. I've managed to, after the first 2 years, our reserves have routinely been well above 10%. They've gotten as high as 17%, 15%, 13%. So we've regularly generated reserves. But when you look at the cost, particularly of schools going up, it has not been possible. If I just had the current tax rate, it was not possible to fund the budgets based on the current tax rates. And so a couple of times I got small increases, but in general, not what we needed. The council is, when I've put tax increases in, they just pull money out of reserves so they don't need the tax increase. And one year they actually took federal money, $40 million of federal money, and plugged a hole in the budget, knowing that money wasn't there next year. So, when you're managing a budget, you've got to be able to manage it from year to year. And so if you had revenues that disappear, like the federal money disappeared, it's very hard, not impossible to balance it, in the following year, or you've got to find other resources. We were fortunate because our reserves and our excess was so high. But this year, that's not the case. And our projections, which were really healthy until Trump came into office, future revenues plummeted, partly because of the employment situation. We are seeing large numbers of people on unemployment. We haven't even seen the worst of it because most of those people kept their jobs at least through October, and some of them until after the freeze was over. And now we're looking, we're sitting on 15,000 federal losses, probably 5 to 10 in the private sector. All of that's going to impact next year's income tax. People who are not going to be working this year are not going to pay many income taxes come next January. And that's going to have an impact on what our revenues are going to be. So the state wrote down our revenues by almost half. We're still more than they were last year, but we're half of what we expected last year. On top of that, the governor and the state are shifting more costs. So between pensions this year will add up to a $30 million cost that is new to us over 2 years. And there's no replacement revenues from that. There are going to be other cuts, services in the county, and we're going to have choices about whether we can fill them. We are plugging federal holes. They're not a lot right now, but there are some. And we're worried about a couple of big federal holes. They've talked about not funding Head Start anymore. And if we got rid of Head Start, that would be an expensive program, but also the most impactful program we have on early childhood education in the county. And so it'd be a disaster for kids going to school because without Head Start, they're going to be farther behind than they are right now, even with Head Start. So we're facing, I'd say some pretty strong headwinds. The other thing is the council, we just have had a fundamental disagreement. The reason, we resort to the property tax or an income tax is because we don't have a very healthy, I would say, differentiated tax base like the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia. And so if you're in Fairfax County, they've got a 4.5% food tax. So it's not on income. It hits people who eat out, and particularly eat out, and spend a lot of money eating out. It's a decent tax for them. They get a decent amount of revenue out of that, but it's 4.5%. On commercial property, the Northern Virginia counties have a 12.5-cent tax on every square inch of commercial property in their counties. And that money provides them a large amount of money to pay for their transportation needs and infrastructure that they've been building in Fairfax County. They've been doing this now for about going back to about 2013. So Fairfax County has this very large source of revenue that we do not have. On top of that, Fairfax County gets about a penny and a half out of the sales tax. So a penny and a half of the sales tax in Fairfax County goes to the Fairfax County government. And on top of that, they've got a licensing tax in Fairfax County that gives Fairfax County $200 million a year off of business licenses. No such tax exists in Montgomery County. So I've been talking to everybody I can. I've been talking to state officials. I've been talking to the council about the need to adopt a tax system that's more like Virginia's tax system, because it puts much less of a burden on county residents. And so far, no one is interested. And so they're not interested because, unlike Virginia, Montgomery County's property tax, residential and commercial property taxes are tied together. So nobody wants to raise property taxes in Montgomery County because you automatically hit residents. In Fairfax County, they raised it on commercial property and no residents get harmed. So they've got that 12.5-cent tax on top of their base tax. Their base tax is $1.15, so businesses are paying about $1.26, $1.27 just for starters. And then they're from special taxing districts, like the one in Tyson's or the one in Reston. Their taxes get as high as $1.49. And Montgomery County's taxes stay at $1.03. So just, you can imagine, that doesn't take much effort to think about the revenues that Virginia is bringing in from sources that our county will not use. The District of Columbia is the best poster child. Their residential property tax is 85 cents, so it's about 18 cents lower than ours. Their commercial property tax, for a property worth $10 million, the tax is $1.89. If it's worth, yes, you can raise your eyebrows, it's $1.89. If their property is worth if it was worth, $5 million to $10 million, you pay $1.77. And if your property is only worth $2 to $5 million, you pay $1.66. So the lowest tax in DC on commercial property is 63 cents higher than our property tax on commercial property. I've raised this issue over and over with the council to try to get them to support legislation at the state legislature that would let us differentiate those two tax rates. And I don't need to go as high as Virginia or DC, but we can certainly do better than we're doing now and make this fairer for everybody else. And to me, this is a really, really big problem because we are limited in our revenues to basically the income tax and the property tax, and no other special taxes really other than the energy tax that anybody pays. And all of it falls disproportionately heavily on the residents of the county. I've also been talking to the state, trying to get the state to support, and I think they're finally coming around because the state has run out of money. They're facing another $1 billion plus shortfall this year. They're no longer a source of funding. Like for us on transportation projects, we never got much money from the state ever. And when I was on the council, I kept saying we should try to get our own taxing authority. And people didn't want to do it. And they said, well, if we do it, then the state will never give us any money. So here we are about, God, how many years now? 15 years after I proposed building out a BRT network in Montgomery County, we haven't built anything that's truly BRT. And Fairfax has built major transportation projects because the state never gave us any money. The fact that we wouldn't spend money did not prompt the state to give Montgomery County money. They just didn't give us anything either, not much of anything. So I feel like we're in a box. We're going to propose our first special taxing district, relying mostly on commercial property in the county. And we're going to propose a small transportation tax increment, hopefully about 1/4 cent, and only because I can't separate it from the commercial property. We're hoping that legislation passes this year that lets us do that. That would be a game changer for us, but we're not going to be able to do that. And I've also argued with the state about the income tax. Maryland, we have a lot of people whose income taxes were drastically reduced by Donald Trump. And, Trump said very clearly that he was going to shift the responsibility for federal programs onto the states and counties, which is what he's doing. So I don't know how people who got that tax increase expected that the state and county they lived in was going to be able to pay for the things that were shifted to us without a tax increase on our side. So I've talked to the governor and legislators without much luck right now to focus tax increases on people who have incomes that are taxable above $1 million and leave everybody else alone. But focus on the very, very upper incomes. You also have something like 41 companies in Maryland that don't pay any taxes. Maryland should fix that. The other thing Maryland should do is lower its corporate income tax rate. And they can do that the same way Virginia did. The reason all these Virginia counties have taxing authority is because none of the money for transportation comes from the state. The state left it to local jurisdictions who raised the money for that. And if we had the ability to do that and had Virginia's system, the state of Maryland could reduce its tax rate on corporations, which would take Maryland from being one of the worst states for corporate income taxes, and we could put ourselves up where Virginia is, which is third or fourth in the country. And I think doing that would do a lot to bring business back to the state of Maryland, to bring business back to Montgomery County. And the taxes that we would focus on would be on places where developers are building and focus more on taking money out of development, which is what Virginia does. But I can't do that this year. So this year, you'll see an increase in taxes, a small one on income and a different one on property tax. And I'm hoping that if we pass the income tax this year, this is another example. State allowed us to go to 3.3% last year. If the council had passed it last year, this year we would have gotten about $80 million off the income tax, which is far more progressive than the property tax. A tenth of a percent, which would be taking somebody from 3.2 to 3.3, which means if you had $100,000 of taxable income, it would cost you $100 a year. It wouldn't have been much of a tax on lower people, but it would have been a nice tax on upper incomes, and it would have yielded about $80 million, and that would have put a big dent in the budget hole we have. If the council passes what we're proposing now, it will not raise money this tax year. It will only start raising money starting in January next year, which means the county will get about maybe $25 million out of a partial year tax. So it would have been good to have had support for that last year when we proposed it to the council. So it's this is a long-standing problem with the county. And the flip side of this is just unmet demand. One of the results of not having money has been the inability to bond for projects in Montgomery County. So, we obviously haven't built any BRT because it's not been possible for us to float bonds like Virginia does to build BRT. But we haven't been able to basically fund the schools and for capital projects. And just bear with me as I explain this to you. Our bond capacity, we were bonding in 2009, $300 million a year for schools. That's capital projects. For most of the last 16 years, I'd say probably at least 11 or 12 of them, the situation of the schools was they needed capacity. So the schools have spent a lot of money building capacity in Montgomery County. The price of that is they spent almost no money on repairs in the schools. So we have schools that are literally falling apart, multiple schools with air conditioning systems that'll fail, they're really expensive. And the school system prioritized capacity over repairs, probably because they had to, probably because people's tolerance for overcrowded schools was pretty low. And so the priority was new construction, and now they're phasing out of that, but they're left with a $2 billion hole in the capital budget. that's built up over the last 2 decades. And there's no way we're going to fill that in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. They're looking for accelerated spending, but over a 20-year horizon, not over a short horizon. I tried to get the bonding up to $400 million so they can make a decent dent. The council wouldn't go there. We lowered our request to $340 million, which would have raised it. We're at 280. That's the other thing I meant to say. We're at $280 million as of last year. The council proposed they would go to $300 million, which doesn't get them anywhere near the amount of money they need to raise to fix the schools. We proposed 340, and that we'd raise it 10 million a year over the next 5 years. We should have been adjusting for inflation every year. Everybody knows that a project that goes into the school system in 2026 is not going to cost the same as it does today when they go around to building it in 2030. This thing called inflation, it bites everybody, and it bites the school system like it bites everybody else. And all the repairs, all the air conditioners and everything else they're going to need get more expensive every year. So we're looking at this. The situation in the schools is going to be ongoing. It's not going to get better next year. They have to deal with the blueprint. That's not going to get better next year. They're going to have some major expenses on early childhood and other things that the school system is going to require. And that's going to make this more challenging. And the county's just at a place where we've got to think about how we're going to do things differently. If you had no tax increase at all, the schools would not be doing many repairs this year or for the next 6 years. And you wouldn't hire the people, the staff they need. Our school system is really vulnerable to lawsuits over special education. They're not able, with the staff they have, to process all of the meetings they have. The number of students with special needs with special needs is creeping towards 20% of the population. That's an enormous number of people. The expense is, teachers for very few people, more counselors, all kinds of things they have to add to the system. Some of the stuff is legally required by the state, so they have to add 120 positions in school support staff for the counselors. So they have people in the school to actually write the reports. And this will probably save us money in the long run because we get sued by people who move to Montgomery County because they know we can't meet the deadlines on special education, so they sue us and then wind up having to send their kids to very expensive private schools just because this county misses deadlines in terms of when they do the reports that are due, because they don't have anybody but the teachers to do them, and the teachers don't have time. So we've got a bunch of things that are coming together this year that make this a pretty difficult budget. The only things that I added to my budget, we know that we're going to have more homeless people. The number has dramatically increased over the past 2 years. We expect it to continue to increase. There are a lot of tenants who during COVID fell behind on the rent. And some of the landlords, there was no point in evicting them. There was nowhere to go. They're starting eviction proceedings over the last year. They're starting to evict a fair number of people. There's a huge backlog in courts still, so they still haven't worked through their backlog. But we expect that they will diligently work through the backlog this year, so we'll see more people on the street this year. And the choice for the county would be doing things like paying $20,000 in back rent or trying to figure out how we deal with them as homeless people. Those aren't fun choices, but we can't afford to pay everybody's back rent. So that's not going to be an option. But that's a real problem we're facing. And I think that nobody here builds affordable housing. We get a minimum number of units that are affordable to people making $70,000 a year or so. We don't build anything deliberately that's for lower income folks. So as rents continue to rise, people are going to get pushed out of their buildings, and that's just going to exacerbate the problem. So this was not a fun budget to put together. Like I said, I funded homelessness programs. I funded healthcare programs. We have a clinic system in Montgomery County that serves uninsured people. now they're starting to get uninsured federal workers who no longer, when they lose their jobs, have insurance, or people in the private sector, when they lose their jobs, they don't have insurance. So our clinic system is now beginning to expand to serve people who don't have access to insurance. And they expect that to add about 3,000 more people to the rolls, maybe 6,000 more people to people who use the clinics. Clinics are supposed to be reimbursed by the county. They've only been reimbursed at 45% of their costs, so they completely rely on charity donations to fill those costs. I think everybody knows donations are down pretty much in the country, but also down in the DC area. So they're in risk of failing. And if we lose clinics, that's just more people who aren't going to have access to healthcare. And that's more problems on the street. Same thing with the homelessness. If we can't figure out how we're going to house more people, those people are just going to be on the streets. And I just got back from Los Angeles at the beginning of January. It is not a pretty sight to see what happens when you do not house homeless people. Downtown Los Angeles is a mess, and it's not a nice place to walk around. Even when the buildings are nice, the general environment is not nice. And we've been working hard to keep as many people sheltered as we can, so this isn't in the streets all the time. But it's a challenge for us to do that. Those are the two big things we put money into, extra money, and then we just made a lot of cuts. Most of the requests departments made didn't get granted, and we took another probably $18 million or so out of existing budgets and cut some programs or cut some people where we felt we could do it with minimal damage. And I told my folks as they were giving me a menu of things to kill, basically, to start with, don't kill anything where human beings are going to get hurt. Start with programs that don't have a direct impact on people, and then move on down the line. So that's sort of the grim view of where my budget is. There's a lot of stuff in there that I think people are going to be happy to see surviving, because I think it's important that we do what we do. I put money back in there for the attorney to help on the land use cases, the People's Council that everybody's been asking for and that we ought to have. And the more park and planning disregards residents, the more you need it. So we put whatever, a couple $100,000 in to pay for that. But a lot of the other stuff is just we're gonna have to wait and see how we come out of the economy and what the governor does. Whether we don't even know. They're still in session till like April 9th. So we don't know if we've seen the end of the cuts or whether we're going to get a break. But we're not going to know that for another month now. So there's still some things up in the air. So that's on the budget front.
All right, let me get you a couple of budget questions before we
Yep.
move on. So Karen Madsen wants to know how we can help small businesses, particularly around Purple Line, where the construction is hurting them.
So the governor has put in more money. I just did an announcement today in Flower Avenue at the theater there. They're putting $3 million into the budget. It's got to be passed by the legislature, with $3 million of more assistance for people around the Purple Line. We've continued to push the state, since this is their doing. They wrecked downtown Silver Spring and kept it for a disaster. I mean, it would be hard to believe that the contractor could possibly take as long as they have to repair the damage they've done to Silver Spring. And this, a lot has to do with Hogan. This is sort of like Hogan's enduring gift to the county. When he signed the contract, he made it so the county could not oversee construction. So the county officials had no ability to force the contractor to fix things, to properly maintain the streets, to smooth things out instead of leaving ridiculous potholes in the road. The governor took all that away from us. And so when he did that, we were kind of left with this out of control contractor that has not been serving us very well. They did tell us today that the Purple Line is about 90% complete, but they've got a lot of overheads to run, because I haven't seen any overheads yet in Montgomery County. And that's a critical, this road doesn't, or this system doesn't happen unless they build that. And if I had more money, I'd put money of our own in. As we put some in before, I don't see this year we are going to be in a position where we're not going to be able to approve any supplementals after the budget's done. There's enough money in the budget to deal with things that we know are going to go over probably. And there's no money, there's no room in there right now to pay for anything else that goes into the budget. So people are going to have to hold off on asking us for more than what's in there right now.
Okay. Jane Cunningham wants to know how best can we support your recommendation to the county council on the MCPS outdoor play space athletic infrastructure?
Oh man, just be in their faces. You know, there's no reason to be using artificial turf. It's not safe. You're dealing with PFAS. You know, kids get exposed to all this stuff. We know that, you know, the younger you're exposed, the more long-term these effects are. And with all the news out there about PFAS and microplastics, the idea that they're still fixated and attached to microplastics and PFAS is not a really good sign. So I took away the money. That's the one good thing, is they may not have any money to build any artificial turf fields. I gave them enough money to build properly built soccer field quality artificial normal turf field, not artificial grass fields, with the proper drainage and all the things you need. You just can't turn a piece of land and just say, okay, this is now going to be a ball field. If you want it to last and if it's going to hold up to playgrounds or hold up to games and practices, you need it to actually be taken care of carefully. And so we've given them enough money to build the fields as natural turf rather than artificial turf. And I have no intention of increasing the amount of money available for that.
Okay, Councilmember Mink's newsletter today mentions UL Research Institute's fire group building a large campus East County south of Eva White Oak. The only open land, though, that's not built is federal land. Will you clarify where this facility will be constructed?
Yeah, it's on Powder Mill Road. When you get behind the neighborhood there, going back toward, I forget the road in Prince George's County that runs into it. But you know where there's a Naval Medical Research Center back there. If you know where that is, it's the land on the north side of the road. Prince George's County has part of the properties in Prince George's County. Almost all of it is in Montgomery County. So it's back in there. It's not backing up to neighborhoods. It's a place where they can, you know, build this kind of stuff, and it's not going to be front and center in people's yards. And actually, it's the kind of thing that we've been trying to get into Montgomery County. It's something that's going to actually add to the tax base, and in both jobs and in terms of property value. It's going to make this. It's going to be a significantly expensive set of buildings that are going to pay a decent amount of property tax. I should have mentioned that before. One of the things we've been trying to focus on is looking for opportunities for light industrial development in the county to try to diversify our dependence on the federal government. And even while we're building life sciences, we know that's not enough. We know we have to go beyond that.
Okay, Jerry Garson.
Why are most of the tax real estate values for land for commercial properties much lower than the nearby residential land values for real estate tax purposes? If we had the same land values for both, you'd raise a lot more money from commercial properties.
So, Jerry, you know the difference is the state law taxes commercial property at the income value of property, and they tax residential property based on comparative values of property. So people own property that they sell for a lot more than what their tax base, what they're being taxed on, but they're based on the income. So the income is rents minus expenses. And just to me, that's not a fair way to tax property.
Well, that's why Maryland should adopt the same rules that New York State has for most of its property, where it has one class for 1 to 3 family residential, apartment houses, commercial property, and utilities. We just have a different one for utilities. But if we went just what New York State does for most of the state, we'd solve most of your problems.
It would help. I totally agree with you. I've raised with the governor and with other state legislators, actually, the difference between what we do and what other people do. Because you can't understand where we are without understanding what we're not doing, that people we think are doing really well, what they do to get there. And it always kills me because the first time I met the governor talking about, the first thing he said is, you got to do something about taxes. Everybody's going to Virginia. And I said, Montgomery County is the cheapest state in the DC region, except for the District of Columbia on property taxes. They're not going to Virginia because of the taxes. They're going to Virginia because Virginia builds infrastructure and builds an environment where people believe they're going to be able to grow. Montgomery County can't do that. Without the revenues to build the infrastructure, we're stuck. And, we showed them Governor Godwin in 2013 wrote a letter after the legislature passed the special taxing districts for the Northern Virginia counties. And he wrote a letter talking about how Tyson's Corner was going to explode with the benefits of the taxing district. And it absolutely did that. So, I've seen what other people do. I keep, trying to learn from what other people do. We did a TIF in the East County for Granville's property. That TIF's going to make a lot of sense. It's going to get some rapid development. One thing the state's considering is legislation that would let us include the sales tax in the TIF. And if they do that, the thing gets paid off a lot faster. And then that means that revenue starts flowing totally to the county, as opposed to being diverted to pay off the bonds. So that's another thing that could be a big benefit to us if the legislature passes what we need.
Alan Bowser, go ahead.
Mr. County Executive, I'm really interested in the data center issue.
Yeah.
I know that the county council had a discussion this morning where they voted down the task force that Councilmember Glass was proposing. I wonder where you are on the data center issue.
So I've asked to at least have legislation ready that if I want to put a moratorium on approvals, I can do that. And I want to give the council a chance to legislate and to get this right before I just put a moratorium on. But my concern is if this drags out too long, somebody goes in and puts a project in while there are no rules for a data center and gets an approval before there are no rules for the data center, making it very hard to put any rules into effect after the data center has been approved. So I'm going to watch very carefully to see, if a proposal comes in, what the proposal looks like. I will ask my team how long they think it's going to take to review it. I'll talk with the council and to ask them how long they think it's going to take before they pass some decent requirements. And then I'll decide whether I give them more time to do that and issue a moratorium, or if I think they can get it done before the issue of approval comes up. But my ability is to stop issuing approvals. And so I could technically stop that pretty late in the game. Certainly, after the project's submitted, I'd still be able to do that.
Do we have a policy for using nuclear reactors for power for the data centers?
Well, so we don't have a policy. I'm sure we'll invent one. But I've been to there's a company in Montgomery County that is building small reactors. But this is the timeline. I mean, their first reactor will not come online for 4 years. They expect the next reactor, after the first reactor has been shaken down and people make sure everything runs as is expected, is 2 years after that. And so they don't see mass production of reactors until beyond 6 years. These data centers aren't waiting 6 years. Nobody has the reactor that they can bring over here. like tomorrow and start construction on. There's no approved SMR, small nuclear reactors right now that you can just buy and stand up. And if you were buying from the Chinese, you could, but Trump's not going to let you buy from the Chinese. So that option is off the table for right now. They're building a bunch of small nuclear reactors. The more I've learned about the small reactors, the more comfortable I am, because the big issue with any reactor is when something goes wrong, does it go critical? And when it goes critical, how much damage does it do? And with the plans, the way new reactors are being designed, it's like actually physical impossible for a reactor to go critical. Some of them have a system where the materials immediately dispersed. One of them uses balls, and the balls are basically freed from the containment area, and they just roll around on the floor, but they're not close enough to each other to create the kind of reaction you would need to generate, a big fire or, explosion. So there are ways to do this, but that's not something that's an option right now. You can do small gas turbines. We're looking into that. We talked with the owner. He says the gas there is dirty and it won't work. But we talked to the guys who run the incinerator, and they said, we're running turbines off that gas and it works perfectly fine. So we're actually going to investigate that and find out, is there an issue with the quality of gas or the volume of gas? Because if he's going to have a backup, we definitely want it to be natural gas turbines with capture of all the pollutants, which can be done, rather than diesel turbines, which are going to be a mess and probably the worst environmental. The only thing worse you could do is probably burn coal again. And it does that. Neither one of those solutions helps with generating energy on site. So they're still tied to the grid. I'm talking to one company that's using what are those things called? Fuel cells. And they're actually worked with some of the bigger data centers in the country and are using fuel cells that are powered by natural gas to generate electricity. That would be a cleaner alternative than even the turbines that burn natural gas. So we're looking at alternatives. I'm trying to get as educated as possible about what's out there, but also what's available, because it doesn't matter what's theoretical. The only thing that matters in this moment is what could you actually put there. The governor has said that he's supporting legislation that would require everybody to bring their power with them, not necessarily to the site, but to add it to the grid someplace in Maryland, which would be beneficial. Doesn't have to be at the site, but it's going to require some thinking that I haven't seen yet. It's easy, again, it's easier to say that you're going to do it. It's a lot harder to get people who are actually going to do it.
Thank you.
Karen Bolte,
I want to just on one issue, because I know water temperature was a big issue for people. And one of the things I do feel comfortable about is that because of the way they're designing this thing and because of where it's located, the water doesn't come from the aquifer, it comes out of the river. It goes back into the river. They think they can get it in within 2 degrees of the temperature that it comes out at. The power plants that are there, their requirement is to come back no more than 20 degrees above the temperature of the water. So if somebody can get to 2 degrees of the temperature of the water, we're probably going to be fine. That's not going to be a problem. But other issues will be problems.
okay, Karen Bolte, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Marc, I was hoping you might talk about your plans for the Dickerson incinerator. I think I read about this today, and I think that this is included partially in your operating budget, to your plans to close it, have a temporary contract to haul trash to other states, but then ultimately replace that facility. So if you could talk a little about that, that would be great.
So we've been trying to figure out a plan to close it. And at first I was thwarted because I stretched it out for 5 years, extended their contract, I think a week before I came into office the first time. So that was an unpleasant surprise. And then COVID kind of messed up some of the planning we were doing, that was a very difficult environment to work on. I got to admit, we were not much focused on anything other than keeping people from dying of COVID and how do we control this little monster. But we've gone back. I'll say we've had some difficulty getting accurate information. We hired a contractor. We found a bunch of flaws in the information that came out of that. I have my own thoughts on why that happened. Doesn't matter what my thoughts are. It just was not the most helpful thing. But we've been able to get enough information now that we're pretty sure we can find somebody who will do it. We've put a bid out for the long haul, but the council's not going to do a long haul because it's not cheap unless they know how you're going to replace the incinerator. And we are now getting to the stage of putting out the RFP for the incinerator, but it's going to be very hard to replace the incinerator, not for the incinerator. It's going to be very hard to get that back in time to make a decision before this budget is due. The good news is it may not require much money in the first year from the county, because what's likely to happen in terms of how most of the companies that do solid waste management and build these recovery facilities, most of them fund them themselves. They build to own and operate, and then the county gets a share of what the market is for the things that they sell. So we're pushing, recovery of as many materials as possible and monetizing it, putting this on the market, and the county would benefit from the things we put on the market as well as the company that does this. But we may actually be able to avoid some of the first year costs of getting the thing built if they're the ones that are issuing the bonds to build the project. And that's normally what they do in other jurisdictions. So that's not something that's out of the question. And one of the things that our consultant had us doing was we were going to be paying for the building of this building, which was expensive. The other thing is all our options are expensive, all of them. There is no cheap way out of this because the incinerator is failing. All 3 boilers have failed at one point or another, and they just repaired 2 of them. So the two that were down are back online. They were putting out furans and dioxin. It is not safe, and it has a very limited life. And so they told us, if we don't make a decision to start long hauling, it's going to cost us $31 million, I think, between the next 2 years to keep this incinerator going, even if we were going to kill it. So if we start long hauling and we start it as early as this summer, we can get ourselves out of having to pay 2 years of stuff that we don't want to pay for. I don't want to make temporary repairs to the incinerator that cost millions of dollars. But here's the scary part of this. This incinerator needs to be rebuilt, needs to be refurbished. There are 2 paths to refurbishment. One path, the cost of refurbishing this thing would be on the order of $300 to $600 million. The other path is they determine that it's deteriorated to the point that it needs to be replaced. Now you're looking at a $1 billion to a $1.5 billion incinerator to meet new requirements. That's more expensive than anything we're envisioning in terms of how do we deal with solid waste. So when this kind of all came together, I've been trying to explain to people, we have no cheap choice here. This is not a choice between, do we move to capturing more of our waste and recycling it, or do we keep the incinerator? We either move to a better way, recycle more, dispose of less, or we spend as much or more to replace the incinerator. But we don't do the new processing and we just keep the incinerator. That's not happening. And they told us that when they did the renewal. We would have to, after these couple of years, we'd be back having to negotiate an all-new contract based on actually all the repairs they think they need to do to the incinerator, and it's not going to be small. So there is no cheap way out of this, but it's paid for in solid waste fees. The more we recover and we're able to sell, And that's one thing. I don't know if all of you have been to our glorious trash facility. The really good things are they're recovering more materials than they ever did before. They're getting electronics, they're getting appliances, they're getting mattresses. Mattresses are yielding a real big benefit for them. They're getting more mattresses than I ever imagined they would get. They're getting a lot of mattresses up there. And it's possible that we have money put aside for reprocessing our plastic, glass, and bottles. It's possible that money could go to integrate that equipment into the new facility, which would save us some money on that. And we've got money put aside for a digester to deal with food waste. And food waste, you get products out of it that are saleable. It improves the mulch quality, but you can also capture the methane and sell the methane commercially to like the farmers who use methane for drying their crops. And we could take their waste, their manure and everything. We could dump this in there too, and then return them natural gas they could use for what they're using natural gas for now. And for all of us electric fans, you cannot afford the electric dryer that it would take to dry the stuff in what are those things called? Silos. So I feel pretty good about the path, but we've got to be able to show the council that there's what the after scenario is if you go to long hauling. They don't want to be in long hauling long term. I don't want to be in long hauling long term. I want long hauling to be as short and with as little material as possible. So the first thing we're going to do is propose no more taking construction debris at our facility. There are people who recycle and take construction debris elsewhere in the county, in the area. We're going to require them to bring construction debris there. That could take about a 20% load out of what we are currently treating at the facility and dumping. And we were going to start with food composting, and everybody's going to have to start recycling food. But if everybody does that, that takes another 20% by weight out of what we're sending, what's in the waste facility. So there are ways to bring down pretty quickly the amount of stuff we're going to long haul, and hopefully we can start moving on that pretty quickly. I tell people, and you guys are the kind of people I tell, we have the ability to really restrict the costs of what it takes us to dispose of solid waste. I look at my own stuff. I live in Tacoma Park, so I've got paper, cardboard, the usual plastic, metal, and glass, and I have food. When I look at my trash bag every week, because I put out trash every week, about the only thing left in my bag are plastics that have been glued to paper or cardboard, and non-recyclable plastics, of which the number of things is beginning to reduce. For example, with a proper recovery facility, plastic films get recovered rather than disposed of. So if all of us did just put our stuff in the proper receptacles for the different waste stream, we would all reduce the amount of stuff that went to a landfill. We'd reduce the amount of stuff that we have to process without being able to recover it, and we'd increase the amount of things that we could sell on the market. And selling on the market is the way to bring down the price on some of this. Some of the stuff we have to sell has high value, some of it has low value, but any value is better than no value. Any value is better than paying to have to put it into a landfill.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we're going.
All right. Chris Reynolds wants to know how close is the county to getting food scrap recycling countywide?
Hopefully by the beginning of the fall.
Great. And then Linda Nemec, you go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Can you give us your impression of what will happen to the housing legislation that was proposed after your comments and on the different amendments proposed, et cetera?
So still fighting. We sent in another proposal from us in Prince George's County, and it makes more sense than anything they're doing. Their housing numbers are not based in reality. There's no calculation you can make from any data available that gets you where they put these numbers. But the most important thing is they completely discard areas like Montgomery County and Prince George's County, which are master planned areas that have plans that go out 30 years and more. Not everybody does what we do. So we've been arguing with the state that, first of all, we're zoned for more than 100,000 units. That is more units that are projected to be needed by 2050. So we have enough housing units to go well beyond the 30-year horizon. And our housing units do not require going into any existing neighborhoods to build any of this housing. This is all redevelopment of places that originally the planning board wanted us to redevelop, which was, the so-called activity centers, shopping centers with large parking lots, commercial strips, all that kind of stuff. That's where, originally development was supposed to occur. And now park and planning is attacking existing residential neighborhoods. And I don't support it. There's no reason to do it. And the fact that they're taking East Montgomery County, Flower Avenue, after they did University Boulevard, there are no jobs. Even downtown Silver Spring has no jobs, virtually no jobs. Not an office center. And park and planning is zoned it primarily for residential by zoning everything for 300-foot heights. You're not going to get a 300-foot office tower there. You're going to wind up getting apartment buildings for luxury housing. That to me is a real problem. So we're continuing to push. We're pushing with Prince George's County. So we've taken a unified position on this. We're asking to be exempted. We're asking for them to use the COG forecast as the projection. We're asking to account the projects that have gone through that have a preliminary approval. For example, they've been reviewed to the point of adequate public facilities, which means you've shown park and planning what you're going to build and how much commercial and residential is in it, because that's the only way you can determine whether or not you pass the adequate public facilities. Therefore, they've gone a long way in investment in their project if they're taking it to the point of asking for that approval. So that's what we're holding out for. There's an enormous amount of backlash all around the state. I view this as, I'm a Democrat. I view this as the bill to create Republicans, because this just flies in the face. It's the kind of thing, I think, of political correctness, which gets everybody in trouble. And it's very frustrating to see the attitude. I went in front of the legislature and I said, it was one of the legislators, Republican legislator, asked me why people were so angry. I said, I'll tell you why people are angry. The most important purchase anybody makes is their home. And when you buy your home, it's not like you sit in front of a map of Montgomery County, take a dart, throw it at the dartboard and say, wherever the dart lands is where I'm going to go look for a house. That is not what people do. They drive through neighborhoods. They look to see, what does the housing look like? Do I like this neighborhood or want my kids to play? Does this neighborhood have quiet streets, or are the streets in this neighborhood have too much traffic where my kid's never going to be able to go out and play in the front yard or in the sidewalk? I played in the street in my neighborhood in Silver Spring. I played baseball on the street and football on the street because the street was quiet enough for us to do that kind of stuff. So this is the most important investment that people make. And to turn around and just say, we've decided that, and man, Jason Sartori with his comment about single family homes are inherently racist. And this is what kept people out of Montgomery County. If anybody ever says that to you, the quickest reply is, Montgomery County was 95% white in 1975. It is 43% white today. Tell me how single family homes kept minorities out of Montgomery County. Because if that was the strategy, it did not work. Because it was never meant to be that. People who had incomes got to move here. And people for a long time, like my parents, could find a house they could afford. My father was a clerk, postal clerk, making $4,000 a year, and he was able to buy a house in 1961. So, and I think I got a good response out of Republicans. I think everybody intuitively knows that the house is just not some piece of property for park and planning to say, we don't like this anymore. So we're going to change your neighborhood. And I can tell you, if I get on the council and I have if I'm there when two of those planning board members come up for renewal, I'm going to vote against it, and I'm going to talk about how these are the people who say residents shouldn't be. I mean, the planning board should not be listening to the residents of the county. I have never heard such crap in my life. It is offensive to have board members who are supposed to be citizen members on the board saying that the board shouldn't listen to the people who live here. It drives me crazy.
Elizabeth Joyce, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to mention there's a lot of recent scholarship that supports the work of those two Vanderbilt people that you had at your session. And it's becoming quite clear that zoning is not the source of the problem, and therefore eliminating zoning is not the solution. And I gave Debbie the analysis by Dr. Jorgensen from Chevy Chase, the PhD from Harvard, who decimated the controller's report and all the assumptions. She just blows away all of the supposed successful examples throughout the country. And the whole premise for it, Maryland is not particularly house starved. It's the whole issue is, as we all know, is affordable housing. But there's so much out there now that contradicts what they're thinking, and what they're thinking is a mythology that started in Minneapolis, where they started not with an economic development study, but with a public relations investment, and that's what
I look at it. I looked at the places that do this, and this is the other list of infuriating things. Almost every place that did this is a city. It's not a county. Austin, which everybody picks on, I know why somebody picks Austin, because it's a nice liberal blue bastion of progressiveness, and they got rid of single-family home zoning. They don't tell you that the way Austin has grown over the past some years is they've annexed part of the county next to it, because they had no place to grow inside of Austin other than a couple of places they reserved for not growing. And so for them to grow, they had to go outside. For places like Minneapolis, they have no place to go because it's basically a built-out environment. So other than some parking lots in downtown and around some smaller shopping centers, there's no way that Minneapolis could handle their growth projection without redoing the built environment. And, that's it. We're not in that situation. If we were in a situation where there was no place for Montgomery County to grow, you could have that discussion. That is not the situation we're in. And my friend in Arlington is on the board, is on the council in Arlington. And when they voted for the single family nonsense, because when they looked at their growth projections, they could not handle the growth projections within what was left of Arlington to redevelop. The only way they could get more growth into the city was to densify the city. And so that's what they did. But that's not Montgomery County. Not when you got 100,000 units out there that you could build tomorrow. Not when you've got almost 30,000 that have approvals, that if the developer finished the approval process or just pulled their permit, they could go ahead and build. And they're ignoring, Park and Planning, of course, ignores facts normally. But, they did the study on East Silver Spring. The study in East Silver Spring said things weren't being built because of the study. The problem was what would happen if you built duplexes, triplexes. Their study said those units would be more expensive than the existing housing. And the developers in White Flint were asked why they weren't building. In White Flint, you could build, north of 10,000 units there. White Flint, the developers told them, you can't get high enough rents here, which means there's not a market. They don't have people with the kind of incomes to afford apartments and high-rise buildings. And if you're trying to do a family, the high-rises actually get more expensive, because now you need another bedroom, and probably now you have to have a second bathroom when you're looking at 3-bedroom apartments. And all that adds to the expense and drives up the cost of the apartments. And they're just not affordable to young families who, even if they wanted to live in an apartment. The other question is, why do we think young families want to live in apartments in places like downtown Bethesda, where there is virtually no green space? And, your kid can't go downstairs and play like I played in the street. I'll walk to the end of the block and find a park, or do what I did, which is burn down a field and make a baseball field there with my friends. You can't do that.
All right. So you said you're still working on your amendments on the governor's bill.
Yep.
Has anyone else heard something on the governor's bill that they want to add to this conversation?
Well, I've heard that there are a lot of state delegates and state senators who think that a lot of work needs to be done on the governor's bill, and it's not likely to pass this session.
Yeah. So I want to answer this question, and it says, what is my answer to the housing? First place, the problem in Montgomery County is affordable housing, and nobody is building affordable housing. The Housing Now proposal, I think Andrew's proposal, what they were going to do on University Boulevard, if you rezone the single family houses there and you could build a duplex, there was no affordability requirement for a duplex. If you built the triplex, you had an affordability requirement on one of the units, and the affordability needed to be affordable to people making $170,000 to $200,000, which is not the problem we have in Montgomery County with affordable housing. We have 50,000 people with incomes below $50,000 who cannot find housing in this county. And that's a real serious problem. And if you do what's being proposed with no guardrails, I take a neighborhood like Connecticut Avenue Estates, where Connecticut Avenue crosses Veers Mill Road and goes into, one time was a middle-class neighborhood, single-family houses. Now it's more heavily minority. But it's a beautiful neighborhood and it's a lot of nice housing. Somebody could go in there and say, we're going to turn this into townhouses. The people who live there will not be able to come back. That is flat out true. They will be gone. And everybody knows it. Everybody wants to pretend. When the planning board chair was asked about that, his response was, they'll find housing somewhere. The affordable housing is not something you find somewhere. It is a very rare commodity in Montgomery County. And as far as a lack of housing in Montgomery County, one of the last reports from one of the real estate groups said that there was, I like the word they use, there was an absorption problem in Montgomery County. You know what absorption, another word for absorption is? Lack of demand. Because they've got housing units out there that are built that aren't being absorbed. They're not being absorbed because there's not enough demand from it. It's the wrong price point. So if you wanted to see more housing get built here and you want to see it get occupied, you might do what Richie Cohen and some of the other developers are doing up around Pike and Rose, where they're asking to be rezoned for townhouses and smaller buildings so they can build housing at a price point that people in Montgomery County can afford. They were initially told by the planning board, we don't want you to do that. We want you to stick with building your 3 high-rise towers. And they kept saying there's no market for the 3 high-rise towers. This no market argument is not my argument. It is coming from developers who are saying there's not a market for high-rises. WMATA, which is building, we're working with them on a joint development agreement for the WMATA metro site in Pike and Rose. And before WMATA agreed to do this, they did an analysis of using that for life sciences, housing, or office. And the analysis came back. No demand for high-rise office, no demand for high-rise housing. Silver Spring, I know this right now. The HOC's got an opportunity to build a building there. They've got a 300-foot height. That's what they were zoned to build. They're not building because they can't find anybody who will build a 300-foot tall building. Why? Because there's not a market for those many high-end apartments. So there's a lot you could do differently. And this is what we need to do. And I don't know why she's asking me. And we had lots of affordable housing in Montgomery County. My office has added almost, I think it's like north of, it'll probably be about 9,000 units or more by the time I leave. How do we do it? We make arrangements with developers. We buy down the price of housing. We spend a lot of money buying down the price of housing to get units affordable to people who need the affordability. When the county has leverage, We require people to give us 25% in affordability. We have bought complexes and saved them from being redeveloped and got agreements to maintain rents at an affordable level. I made a deal with a developer on Twin Brook Parkway that in exchange for a piece of county land, we would get deeper affordability than what the county agreed to, more units than the county agreed to. So we build a lot of affordable housing and we continue to do it. And I don't know what, obviously, person asking this question probably ought to go to our website where you can see the housing projects that we've done and that we're doing. We routinely are putting in about $100 million a year, more than pretty much everybody else around us, except for DC, which has got a $22 billion budget. That may be changing, but we are serious about building affordable housing here. We just don't believe, knocking down affordable housing and getting market rate housing is a good plan. And I don't understand how you don't understand by looking at the proposals by Park and Planning that you're actually watching the planned disappearance of existing affordable housing so they can build high-end housing. And if you're not looking carefully enough, then you're really not looking.
I know at Chevy Chase Lake, there was a large amount of naturally occurring affordable housing that came down in favor of very, very high-end housing. What is the average rent in those buildings? $7,000 a month or something?
Well, my favorite one is the Strathmore. The apartments on top of the Strathmore metro station. They get thank Andrew, I think Evan and Hans, they pay zero taxes. And they have apartments there going for $12,000 a month, $10,000 or $12,000 a month. It is a joke that we lose all the tax revenue off these things and they get, whatever profits they want. And there was no reason to give them no taxes. This conversion of office buildings, if they're 50% vacant, which is easy for a developer to do, you go 50% vacant and then you pay no taxes for 20 years. And when the council passed that, we brought them examples of 4 buildings already being converted in Montgomery County. One of them in Silver Spring on Georgia and Cameron, being converted from office to residential. These guys asked for no tax break. No tax break.
Yeah, the other thing I'm concerned about, I had asked Rich Madalena a long time ago. He said he would try to find some way to keep track of buildings, new construction that's taking advantage of that conversion tax break.
Yep.
Because I'm not sure if we have anyone here from Cabin John tonight, but if you do, please speak up. But they're a new member, and they wrote me an email saying they wanted to talk to me about a shopping center they have that may have been sold and was advertising as eligible for that tax credit. But if they're just evicting people, so then they're vacant, and they're going to put high-end townhouses there that are going to get a 20-year tax break.
Now, if the townhouses are owned, there's no tax break.
Oh, okay.
If the townhouses are rented, there's a tax break.
Okay, so I don't know what they're doing with that shopping center now. It's being
now, if he converts, any of it to an apartment building, which makes no sense at all.
Right. I mean, some of these buildings, like there's one on East West Highway, I heard, kind of a low-rise office building that's being advertised as eligible for that tax credit.
Yep.
They'll just evict people. It was supposed to be blight, buildings that were falling apart and empty, but it wasn't supposed to be functioning commercial buildings, just evict everyone and get the tax credit.
And particularly when you know that people can do, in fact, Park and Planning did their own report on building conversions, and they said the market now supported building conversions. It was now economically viable to do that. So Park and Planning completely ignored their own report, which they do all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no point in having them do a report. They just do a report and then they tell you something completely different.
Right. Genevieve posted again that by your own admission, we need more affordable housing. So which is true? We have enough or we need more?
I don't know why she keeps harping on it. They keep saying we need more affordable housing, and what they're doing will not produce it.
Right. It costs costs a lot of money. It takes a supplement to build affordable housing.
We're supplementing anyway, but I can't supplement $12,000 apartments.
Right.
That's
Right.
just beyond real.
Right. Right. Right.
And why should we should, if anything, all the council has to do is stop the requirement for affordable housing. Require
Right.
30%.
Right. Or somebody should dedicate more money to it.
But there's nobody going to do this. It's like,
Yeah.
we'll not get political now.
All right.
It's a problem.
Liz Joyce, go ahead.
Yes, well, I think it's interesting. Has anyone done a study of what results there have been from these massive tax giveaways? I was thinking about the apartments over the metro and so on. They gave, as you say, huge giveaways for that, and they never tie these giveaways to any kind of commitments on the part of developers. So this is one of the issues that is costing the county a great deal of money. We are subsidizing developers in this
Yes, we
way
are.
and not getting what we want or need.
It also takes the money out of our budget, which makes it harder for us to pay for things. So I'm handing away money to developers. At the same time, I'm cutting money for services to residents. There is absolutely, I don't know how the council justifies the giveaways at a time when everybody knows revenues are scarce. And it wasn't like this just happened with this budget. We've had an ongoing issue because that's why we're using reserves, is we know that we are short on money. So the last thing I need to do is give away tax revenue.
Mm-hmm. Linda has suggested, and it's something I've been thinking about lately, whether at some point we ought to make a move to repeal that 20-year tax break for conversion.
I get on the council, first thing I'm going to do.
All righty. We have our
I may have a list of things like that.
We understand the assignment now. Okay.
Yep.
Anybody else? We can go back to the governor's housing bill. I perceive that we need more grassroots work. I don't know if anyone here has activated their neighborhood with delegates yet. I think we have to keep working until this is over. Does anyone have any feedback on grassroots work? No? Oh, Howard, go ahead.
Sorry.
I didn't see
we know that at least one member of the legislature at a hearing held up a 5-inch thick file and said words to the effect that the only time I get this many emails from people who are opposed to a bill is when it involves gun control. And the efforts that have been made by the Civic Fed, by CCCFH with their JOT form, and then the outreach to individual legislators, because I know that people have been doing that as well, I think has really had an impact. The latest that I am hearing is that there are at least 2 Montgomery County state senators who have said that the bill will not make it to the governor's desk, that there'll be some sort of not even a compromise, but a bill that mandates a study and not much else. And one member of the D16 House delegation has said that he would be shocked if Starter and Silver makes it out of the Senate. So I think the headwinds that we were facing have diminished somewhat, but I agree with Cheryl, as long as we haven't reached sine die, we still need to keep fighting.
Thanks, Howard. Joel Teitelbaum, go ahead.
Yes, County Executive Elrich, I'm asking you this in your role as County Executive, not as a political figure. What do you see as the impact if the governor's bill goes through on existing small or modest single-family home, mainly some apartments, neighborhoods along corridors in Montgomery County? What impacts do you see on these neighborhoods if the governor's bill goes through? And I'm not assuming it will or won't. I just want to know the implication.
You're muted, Marc. Let's see if I can. Rats.
There.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm back. Look, I mean, I think different neighborhoods are going to be affected differently, and a lot of it has to do with what happens with land speculation. So, there are a lot of builders who, like the guys who do the tear downs in a place like, Bethesda, where they can get a high value house. They may look at some of the corridors as an opportunity to build more expensive duplexes. One of the things one of the reasons that I got very interested in this is because I was trying to figure out whether somebody would build 3 units rather than a duplex on a lot. And the economics is sort of like this. If you're going to build a triplex, your units are going to be about 16 feet wide, and you're going to have about 6 feet left over on either side or side yard. You're not going to, they're small, and a 16-foot wide apartment, in case you've ever been on one, is a little difficult. You don't get rooms on both sides of the corridor that are decent sized. So it's not optimal. If you build 2 24-foot wide townhouses, you can build a bigger townhouse. It's much more like a home. 24 feet wide isn't much off of being 28 feet wide. And you can have rooms on either side of a corridor. And so I can see these developers who've been doing stuff in Bethesda picking the right neighborhood and grabbing some of the houses along the main road. And if they're rental properties, which is our worry on University Boulevard, half the units are rental and almost all of them are minority owned. And so somebody's going to come in and take those rental units, knock them down. Those people are gone. I realize the people in greater Washington don't care about that. But those people are out of here. And then they'll build a duplex, and the duplex will sell for something that requires a $200,000 income or more. And then you're not going to have any affordable housing. You could also take neighborhoods like Connecticut Avenue Estates or some other neighborhoods that maybe they think they can get really high densities in, and you could buy up a block of houses. There's nothing on the interior to stop a developer from getting multiple residents to agree to sell out. And if you go to somebody and you say, I'm going to build this over here, and you may not like it because, maybe you're going to wind up with buildings overlooking your backyard or stuff like that, or you're going to wind up with a parking lot and a lot more traffic. You could scare people out of keeping their housing because they feel like their neighborhood's not going to be what their neighborhood was. I can see those changes happening. There was a neighborhood in Bethesda that once tried to do it. They weren't successful, but they were ready to, sell their houses and get a much higher density there. And they were obtuse to the fact that they would put that right up against another part of the neighborhood that wasn't selling their houses. That's the kind of thing that pits neighbor against neighbor, which I think is probably not a good thing. And I don't see people doing this and living in the house themselves. I see people cashing out because the cash is going to be really good. And the price goes up. I mean, one of the things Park and Planning found when they studied Silver Spring was you bought a lot, the price is the same as or greater than the existing houses, even if you built a duplex on the lot. So there's a lot of reason to do it. And then once one lot sells and you see what a developer builds there, and suppose they build a nice house that goes for more than what your house is worth, the price of land just went up. Because once people realize people are making a lot of money on this, they're going to want a piece of the action too. That's human nature. I'm not going to blame anybody for it, but it's going to change the nature of what gets built. And then, like I said, Connecticut Avenue Estates is a nightmare scenario where you just go in there and you can buy up lots of property from landlords. It's already got a street pattern for single family houses, and you convert it to, whatever you want to convert it to. And those people will not be coming back. And that's the thing. People forget these folks just don't come back. They're not able to come back to houses. I had this argument with Park and Planning and said, well, we'll make this, the tenant could have the right of first refusal, but in a lot of places like I know at Tacoma Park, Langley Park, you have more people living in a house or in an apartment than landlords will allow to live there. And so those people are not going to come back. In a neighborhood where the landlords don't have much competition over the housing, and it has a reputation of being lower priced housing, they put up with more. Just like tenants who live in low income housing put up with poorer services because they've got no place to walk to. And I think the danger is that you wind up with people making choices that are good for them economically, not good for anybody else economically.
Dan Mayer, go ahead.
Yeah, this weekend I was approached by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation as a longtime member to get excited about the Trump administration's cuts to the Clean Water Act and other such programs. And so I reminded them that they also need to be concerned about the proposed increased density in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, and pointed, for example, that just recently Anne Arundel County had to put a sewer moratorium like what happened in Montgomery County years ago because it exceeded the capacity of this sewage treatment plant. They can jump high and low about increased density and hope that it won't increase traffic because people may use public transportation or walk or bike, but they do go to the bathroom at the same quantity, regardless of what kind of transportation they take. And the recent pipe breakage in Rock Creek, I was astonished to read in the Montgomery Banner, but almost all of that sewage comes from Bethesda, Potomac, all these things into the district. And
no, that's not fair. It comes, first place, the main people on the line are Virginia. And that line comes out of Fairfax County.
Yesterday I had dinner with former president of the Shepherd Park Citizens Association, and she reminded me, and I remember when I had to write the checks for my parents' water service in the district, that water bill is every month, and it's enormous. And so while everybody complains about the cost of their sewage bill in Montgomery County, it's nothing compared to the district. So if they want to increase all this density, they're going to have to build some sewage plants in Potomac. Lots of luck.
Well, regardless of what happens with this in Montgomery County, we actually, we're doing a stormwater study because the amount of flooding reached the point that it was obvious this is not like a small localized little problem. And so we hired, what do you call it? The water people, the water study, hydrological study, a company to do a hydrological study of the stream valleys in Montgomery County. And they started with the Sligo Valley. And we realized there are places that aren't in floodplains now, or don't think they're in floodplain now, that are actually going to discover that they're sitting in floodplains. And, for years we treated a lot of this flooding as if, the flooding is happening right in front of your house, at the drain right in front of your house. And then you discover that the water is backing up because so much water is coming down into that area that it's, having an adverse impact on everybody. And your pipe is just the place where it starts backing up and coming out. So the fixes are going to be bigger than fixing the drainage in front of someone's house. It's having to look at the whole piping system. And I'll tell you, that is a nightmare because we have to go into the ground and replace smaller pipes with larger pipes. It is not going to be cheap.
So before we go to John Holden for the last question, I just want to mention to you, Mark, that today Casey Anderson sponsored a roundtable at the Affordable Housing Conference on the state's targets for housing, how they derived them, and how it's possible to meet them. I didn't see it. I just wanted to mention to you because I know you're interested in how these targets were derived. Somebody from the state housing department was in the roundtable, but I think it's been recorded, so we'll be able to see that discussion. I just wanted to tell you about it. Okay, John Holden, last question.
Hi there, Mark. I want to talk with you a little bit about a different subject. But first, thank you so much for being here tonight and for everything that you're doing, especially related to affordable housing and zoning and the like. But what I wanted to mention to you has to do with bus rapid transit implementation on US 29. I live in the Four Corners area. I serve on the Corridor Advisory Committee for US 29, Colesville Road. And many Montgomery County residents support the public transit and the general concept of the BRT, but we want any implementation to be financially responsible, supported by data, beneficial to all residents and commuters. And the details matter. And unfortunately, the current US 29 BRT Phase 2 plan, the 35% design, preliminary design, is none of those. I don't know if you realize the following about this preliminary design, which is the current CIP budget proposes an additional $115 million for final design and construction. So first, it has to do with the dedicated median lanes on 29. These lanes would be for BRT flash buses only. And it would actually make travel times much worse for everybody else, including every other form of transit, other types of buses, metro, ride-on, school buses, commuter buses, etc. Also, the preliminary design requires purchasing property and easement areas in order to widen 29 up to 12 feet. It would take away yards, parking spaces, even one business's office building, likely perhaps closing that business. The proposal requires reconstruction on 29 down the median that would be costly and disruptive because it would require relocation of utilities, removal of trees, purchase of land, etc. And the residents and the businesses along 29 do not want disruptions that are similar to the Purple Line project. And then importantly, I know that you believe that a dedicated lane is an important aspect of BRT, but even if this were implemented for the majority of the US 29 corridor, the flash buses would still be in mixed traffic for a majority of the corridor. And yet we'd be spending $115 million and causing this disruption and the like.
I'm willing to go back and look at some of the numbers you talked about, but frankly, I think median makes a lot of sense, and a lot of jurisdictions do it down the median. I would do it as reversible. I would not put 2 lanes down there because your traffic.
They proposed 2 lanes through Four Corners, removing traffic lanes in each direction, and these would be 24/7 impacts on all the other vehicles, which, among other things, would lead to a lot of cut-through neighborhood traffic. And it would introduce the median lanes, introduce numerous left turn prohibitions that requires 3 new traffic signals to access neighborhoods and businesses. And this is going to discourage small businesses from moving into the area along US 29. I think it's going to have a negative impact on
I don't disagree with you on. So there are places in Montgomery County, like George Avenue, where you can't make left turns and there is no BRT. There are places where the traffic is congested enough, you just can't do it certain hours of the day. So this is not something that other people aren't dealing with in other parts of the county. So that doesn't exactly surprise me. I'm interested in minimizing the footprint, and I'm happy to look at again what they're assuming about this. We were trying to avoid. I'm not sure what office building you're talking about being taken, because I can't think of an office building that is actually in Four Corners on that part of the street. There's shops on both sides of the street, and we're not supposed to be going into the area where the shops are. We're not supposed to be taking the sidewalk away there.
It's the office building for an auto body shop that's on 29 up near Burnt Mills.
Burnt Mills Auto Body near the Trader Joe's.
Right.
The building. Oh, the Trader Joe's is in that shopping center.
That's not really an office building. It's just a converted auto shop. It's one and a half stories high. It's a big nothing.
Oh.
Obviously, we have different opinions on the value of the thing. Like, I'll look at some of the stuff that, because I'm concerned about implementation. But if we don't do something, we now have Howard County is going to run this into Howard County. We've got a shot at getting people who want to get out of Howard County and get into the District of Columbia or Bethesda or Silver Spring and getting them off the road, which we did not have before. But this thing is going to run to downtown Columbia. And if need be, I mean, they've been running it on shoulder on the upper part before you get to New Hampshire Avenue. There are some proposals to fix the interchange at New Hampshire where they don't need to do any construction or take anybody's yards. But there's a way to make sure that you don't narrow down like the way the road does right now and then widen again. But I will talk to my people and ask them to give me a briefing on it at least.
That'd be good. I think a version of the managed lane option that allows for at least all types of transit buses would be much less disruptive and potentially less disruptive, less expensive, and more effective. And I wish that they had chosen that back in November of 2022, because it probably we'd be already benefiting from the improved service if they had been doing that, worked on that from the beginning.
I didn't understand why the previous county executive did not plan out the thing the first time. Would have been a lot easier. Because we call it bus, I don't even call it bus rapid transit, I just call it the Flash. Because there's nothing rapid about it. Once you get inside of New Hampshire Avenue, it's just like being in a parking lot.
Well, I appreciate that you'll be looking at some of the things that I described, because I suspected that you perhaps weren't aware of the details that matter with the preliminary design that for which there's now a proposal to spend an additional $115 million. Thanks.
Okay. Send my office an email so I know what specifically you want me to look at.
Got that, John?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, well, we are going to say thank you now to the county executive. We have a little bit of our routine business that we put off to the end of the meeting. But I thank you so much for coming. You're always so great about coming and helping us out with our understanding of things. Let us know what we can do during any of these processes to help reinforce your position.
Yeah, the only thing I'd ask you guys is, take the long view of taxes and use this as an opportunity to try to push the council toward making kind of changes that would take some of the burden off you, period. So that, we have a situation where commercial property actually contributes like they do in the district and like they do in Virginia.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I mean, we're a bunch of suckers for putting up with this.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, we're going to move on to our routine business now and try to power through it. First, is approval of the agenda, which appeared on page 2 of the newsletter published online. Is there a motion to approve that?
Motion to approve.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The agenda is approved. Next is approval of the minutes of the February meeting published online at page 10 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Next is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson, go ahead.
We operate on a fiscal year from July 1 through March 9th, which is today. We've taken membership dues of $1,966, and we've had expenses of $1,384, giving us a net income for the period of $582. Our current bank balance is $6,270, and there's been no changes in expenses since the last meeting. If anyone has any questions, please contact me.
Okay, and next is announcements. According to the bylaws, the president names a nominations committee. The nominations committee recommends a person for each elected position. If you're interested in serving on the nominations committee, please email me sometime after this meeting. I'll name a committee and then it gets a confirmation vote of the membership at the April meeting. That the nominations committee will present a slate at the May meeting. Nominations for the floor will also be accepted in May. The ballots will go out electronically between the May and the June meeting, and the results announced at the June meeting. Alan has an announcement.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to announce that that several groups in our county's environmental community is sponsoring a county executive forum. It's on March 16th from 7 to 8:30 at the Silver Spring Civic building with all of the candidates for county executive, hosted by Kojo Namdi. And they're also doing a forum for county executive candidates this Friday at 12 noon at the Civic building. I guess that's his regular politics hour. So 2 opportunities to listen to the candidates for county executive.
Okay. Are there any other announcements that anyone wants to make?
I just want to say that the CCCFH is planning two forums. One is for the county executive and one is for the District 1 candidates. They would have liked to have done one for all the at-large candidates, but there are 17 of them. And we're not sure we could pull that off. We'd be there all day and night probably. The dates for one of them is set, but I think it's the let me see. I think it's the 19th, April 19th, but I'm not sure. We've had some flux. That's the problem. We had 2 dates and then we had to pull one back. But I'll let Leanne get a note to you, Cheryl, to get it out to everybody.
Okay, maybe there's something that we can put together quickly as a joint project on the at-larges.
Okay, talk to Leanne, okay, because she's actually doing it.
Okay, all right. Any other announcements, anyone? Anything under new business? Old business? Okay, now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Have a good night.
Night all.